You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. For our second topic of this Cricket Ramblings episode, Jehan, let's talk about Test cricket and mainly talking about the recent idea of tiers, divisions, promotion, relegation. That's been in the news. That's been talked about over the years. Recently, Australia, India, and England had a get together. They talked about it, talked about this idea about promotion, relegation, and tiers in Test cricket. Whether it helped Test cricket or not is another matter. We don't know how exactly the structure will be or the format because that hasn't really been revealed, or I don't think anyone knows how that will work. Could be incorporated in the World Test Championship going forward. Always good to explore possible ideas, I suppose. And, the ICC had this idea back in the early 2000s, read an article about that, about having a 3-tier system back in the day, which was proposed. So it has been talked about for a long time, Jehan, about promotion and relegation. So what are your thoughts on promotion and relegation in Test cricket, Jehan? Do you think it will improve Test cricket, or do you think it will hinder Test cricket, especially the smaller nations, if we do go down this route?
I've had a long think about it, and overall, I think it would be a good idea. So I think there should be 2 tiers of 6 teams with promotion relegation. I think the promotion relegation should be 2 teams, so number 5 and 6 go into the second tier, and 7 and 8 go back into the first tier. I think that's the way it should be done. I think that to me, it will make Test cricket more competitive overall and more of a spectacle. I mean, as Australian fans, we're not really looking forward to when Bangladesh comes to play 2 or 3 tests here, or Afghanistan does, or Ireland does. What other teams would there be there?
Zimbabwe.
Yeah, Zimbabwe. I mean, even the West Indies, I know that they had that one-off win last year, but that was really a bit of an anomaly when you look at it, the trend over the last 20 years. So, yeah, I mean, those aren't series that we really look forward to. I think it will make Test series more competitive. I think it will give the lower or the nations that who aren't at quite at the same standard as Australia in the rankings, it will give them more of a chance to be competitive and improve their Test cricket. So it would mean more series between Bangladesh and Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, Ireland, all playing against each other, and then that will give them more incentive to improve their standards and get to the top of the table, and then get promoted into the first division. So I think that can only be a good thing. The other thing is I think that the teams playing in the first division will have to maintain or have a they'll have to maintain their standards to be able to stay in that first division. Otherwise, they're going to get relegated. So, for example, if England, if they have a terrible couple of years, they may end up in the second division, playing the lower ranked teams, which they, to be fair, they probably would win against those teams, but it's not going to be bringing in the same revenue or the same interest within their home countries. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing. The thing I'd want to avoid probably is if you've got 6 teams in the first division, the Ashes happens every 2 years. I want it to stay that way. I wouldn't want an Ashes series to be happening every year for example. Michael Holding made a point about how he thinks they should play each other home and away within their own division, and then they should also be playing a team in the other division in the home of the team from the second division. So, for example, let's say Australia number 1, and they play all the teams within that first division, and then they have to play the first team, the team that comes first in the second division, in their home. So they have to go play an away series there. So that could potentially be a good challenge, because that would mean maybe going to Sri Lanka for an away series, or maybe going to Pakistan for an away series, or Bangladesh for an away series, where conditions are going to be foreign. So I think it's a good idea overall. It also means that there's, for the lower ranked teams, I don't think they're going to improve that much if they're constantly playing Australia in Australia, or England in England, or even if they're going to India in India. If Afghanistan go to India for a test series, they're just going to get, you can predict the outcome of that series before it's even started. So I think it gives them an opportunity to improve in the long format, and then gradually be able to challenge the top side. So I think it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always possibilities, I suppose. There's always solutions to make sure that everyone in the 12 test playing nations get an opportunity to play each other regularly, higher ranked or lower ranked countries. There's always possibilities there. Of course, people are going to, offer their thoughts on it as well. But the ICC have considered this for a very long time. It's nothing new. It's always been talked about every few years or so. Even back in the early 2000s, in that article that I read and sent to you, Jehan, in preparation for this episode, made some interesting points about that consideration of that idea for 3 tiers in Test cricket. It was quite an interesting format that they came up with, or proposed at the time, which was, not too dissimilar to what the proposed idea is at the moment, but some major differences there. But will it help the lesser nations? Will it? I suppose you need everyone to agree. You need the smaller countries on side. If they say yes, but what's in it for us in return? So there's always a catch or something there. So you need agreement, and some people have made the point about what happens if England are in Division 2 and Australia in Division 1. What happens for the Ashes? Do we still play the Ashes or not? And we forgo it, or something like that.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah. So what happens there? Or vice versa with the Border Gavaskar Trophy. Do we still play it anyway?
I would just say, well, you have to be good enough.
Yeah.
You can't be mediocre and keep expecting to play the top side.
Yeah. No, that's very true. But what happens there? Do they still play the series or forgo it when it comes to that?
Well, I think they forgo it. But the thing is, if you think about it, the team that's taken their place have taken their place on merit, right? And if they have a series that's not entertaining and Australia just destroy them, then they're going to go down to Division 2 and England come up again, and then you'll have the Ashes series. So it's just a way of making sure that teams maintain their standards.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think a lot of people would say it should improve competition within Test cricket as well, and how smaller countries get better and improve, like the West Indies and Zimbabwe, for example, or Bangladesh. But yeah, yeah, a lot of people have said, it's a good thing and a bad thing for Test cricket because of the smaller nations and the money
I
distribution
think
and all that stuff
it's
as
going to
well.
depend on how it's done. Is the focus going to be on trying to improve the standards of the lower ranked nations, or is it really going to be focused on trying to make as much money as possible out of series between Australian England, Australian India, etc.?
Yeah.
So it's going to depend on where that focus lies. Yeah, I think if it makes Test cricket more competitive, I think that's only going to be a good thing. And also, when you think about it, like what makes a team good at Test cricket? Obviously, talent, but then it's also about the culture of cricket within that country. The first class system within the country. Do they have a culture of long form cricket within those countries? If I take the West Indies, for example, that's something that's just died after, the early 2000s, pretty much. Since T20 came in. I mean, when I was there in the Caribbean, they still love cricket and they love T20 cricket, but they're not really interested in first class or Test cricket. They still play it. I mean, they still have enough talent to play it, but they end up, generally being mediocre compared to other countries who have a passion for Test cricket. And this is the other thing, like, what gives countries a passion for Test cricket? A lot of it is to do with winning. That's why Australia love Test cricket, because they win a lot, and India, they win a lot at home. You could say the same thing about England.
Yeah.
When the West Indies was strong, you used to get massive crowds coming to all the Test matches because they were expectant, that West Indies were going to win. So, what I would like to see is this system just becoming a way of improving the standards of the lower tier nations, but then also maintaining the standards of the more established nations as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good point you make there, Jehan. Basically, there's no first class cricket structure in Ireland, from my memory. Well, they
Yeah.
used to have one, but it sort of fell away. Now they're trying to get it back up again, I think. I don't think there's one in Afghanistan. I don't think there is. Maybe there is. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But that
for me, those nations shouldn't be playing Test cricket if they don't have an established first class system.
Well, I think the ICC at the time, when making those decisions in terms of them becoming test playing nations, they sort of had their other objectives and had other things about those countries joining the test cricket family, I suppose. But it comes down to just giving them money and funding in terms of trying to establish those first class systems in
Yeah.
place. I'm not sure about Zimbabwe. I think they have a first class system, but I'm not sure if it's functioning well. Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe someone can tell us. But every country is different in terms of their first class systems and how they introduce that into the country or try and get that established. But that's the thing. How would you structure it? That's the question. Is it just going to be tiers? You're just going to have two tiers of the top ranked teams in tier 1 and then tier 2, and then they don't play each other forever. We don't want that. You need some sort of jeopardy. You need some sort of integration and interaction with the two. You need to have that. Otherwise, what's the point? And then those lesser countries are going to say, you know what? If there's no promotion or relegation, we're just going to do our own thing and just go. And we don't want that to happen. So you need some sort of promotion relegation, not just a tier system, not just segregation with top rank and lower rank countries. It's great watching an Ashes series and a Border Gavaskar Trophy like we just had. But you'd like something different. Those events happen on a yearly base, on a sort of year cycle. So you look forward to the next Ashes series in Australia, be the next 4 years, or a Border Gavaskar Trophy. But if it happens every 2 years or every year, then it becomes a bit stale, a bit boring. You need something different there. So whatever structure and format the ICC come up with, they need to think about these finer details and whether or not the smaller countries would agree to it, because you need to get them on board as well. Everyone needs to agree on it and sign off on it and do it. So we won't see this happen probably in the next few years. I think the next World Test Championship cycle will probably see it the cycle after, probably come in, or whenever it's introduced or something. But it's got its benefits. It's got its advantages, disadvantages. It's got the pros and cons for it. But we just need to explore the idea, talk about it constructively, and have a good think about it, because we need something to help Test cricket, and this could be the thing. We just need to have an open mind and just discuss and talk about the potential format if we're going to go down this route.
Yeah, well, I mean, because something needs to change, because financially only England, Australia, and India can afford to play long Test series. The West Indies have, they've almost given up with Test cricket. They're not interested at all, really, when you look at it. South Africa was sort of going that way, but I think in recent times things have changed around a little bit. One of my bugbears with the WTC system is that how can you have a league competition where one team plays 22 matches and the other team plays 10? It makes no sense to me at all. So, which is like England plays so many Test matches because financially they're able to. That's what makes them the most money. They're like the most. If they can play as many Test matches as possible at home, they make a lot of revenue, which is not the same for the West Indies. I was watching some matches from the early 2000s and late 90s, and there are massive crowds at the Test matches and ODIs in the Caribbean. Whoever was playing, whether it was South Africa or Australia or England. Whenever England tour there, that's gradually changed from a majority West Indian crowd to now it's a majority Barmy Army crowd with a few West Indians scattered around. So something's definitely changed in the culture there. And it all comes down to, I think we talk so much about T20 and white ball cricket and limited overs cricket, but I think when it comes to international competition, the barometer of how well a team is doing or how popular the sport is as an international sport in that country is Test cricket. It is, because if there's no Test cricket, but there's still interest in cricket, it's going to be T20, and T20 is mainly league-based cricket. So that barometer of how strong a team is in the international sphere is Test cricket. And in the old days, ODI cricket would be downstream of that, but things have sort of slightly changed in that sense in probably in the last 10 years or so. But yeah, I think going forward, if international cricket is to be preserved, I think Test cricket has to be prioritized, and I think this is probably a good way of doing it, because if you think about it, when you think about it, there already are two tiers, right? In terms of ability, you can see that there's already two tiers.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah. And the problem is, and the issue is, you don't get much interest from the tier 1 teams playing the tier 2 teams, especially if they're playing at the home of the tier 1 team, because you just the result before the series is even or the match is even started. So it really depends on where the ICC sees cricket going forward. Is is Test cricket still going to be prominent in the next 20 to 50 years? I think it should be, because otherwise, because I think for me, if T20 takes over, it's just going to be a league-based form of cricket all over the world, and international cricket will sort of lose value and meaning, really. Yeah, so I think it's a good idea. One of the other things I'd say is I think most Test series should, or all Test series, I would say, should be a minimum of 3 tests. I would say the same for the WTC final as well, but that has an issue logistically in terms of trying to schedule that. But yeah, so, and I think, if Bangladesh are regularly playing Zimbabwe, the West Indies, Ireland, Afghanistan, they're going to improve, because it's experience. They're playing in test match conditions against against opposition that aren't ranked as high as, or aren't, in terms of quality, aren't as good as Australia or England or India. So it's going to give them opportunities to develop their long form cricket. And I think eventually, if that keeps going, they can only get better. They can only improve, and then you're going to have a situation where they're able to challenge the tier 1 teams. That's the way I see it going forward. I think Michael Holding was in favour of this. I've seen a lot of other ex-West Indian players have been completely against this. I read something that Clive Lloyd wrote recently, and he was talking about how the West Indies are going to disappear from Test cricket, and we were once this side that dominated all these other teams, and it was a very sort of emotional, sort of passionate kind of response from him. But what I would say to him is, I think you're sort of living in the past. That's just not how things are going for the West Indies at the moment in Test cricket. So you have to look at how things are in the modern world and adjust to that going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it comes down to crowds. If your team's performing well, they will watch.
Yeah.
If they don't, they won't bother. And we've seen that in many countries. Like, the West Indies is not a country; it's a region of islands that make up the West Indies cricket team. But they haven't performed for a very long time, and of course, people are not going to watch if the results are not going to be favourable.
Yeah.
So you see that in other parts of the world as well. So it can make a difference if they keep playing cricket continuing. And we've seen with the West Indies that they do have talented players. We saw that in Australia last summer when they won that test at the Gabba. They're capable of producing their best when they can.
Well, that's the most disappointing thing about the West Indies team to me. When I see a lot of those players, I feel like if they grew up in England or Australia, they would become great Test cricketers. Particularly some of the bowlers that have been coming through, like
You've got Azari Joseph and Shamar Joseph coming through.
Yeah, Jaden Seals, Obed McCoy. They're all talented bowlers. And they've got a few good. Well, actually, I think their most talented batsmen get lost to T20, so that's become a bit of an issue. Like Nicholas Puran has only played 5 or 6 first-class games for Trinidad, and he's probably one of the most talented players in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So that's a problem as well. And they've got some of the batsmen that came to Australia last year. They didn't score massive amounts of runs, but they held their own. They did get some 40s and 50s.
Yeah,
and
De Silva, the keeper, he did well in that series.
There was a guy called Alec Athanasi, I think his name was.
Yep. You had Hodge, who did pretty well in that series. He scored 100 in England last year.
Athanasi quite highly. But the thing is that they're not going to become decent Test cricketers unless they're playing a a lot of first-class cricket, a lot of long-format cricket, and if they're playing in front of passionate home fans, as was the case 20 years ago, and they're able to compete with the other side, then that sort of, they're only going to improve from that. But they don't get that sort of same opportunity as what happens in England, Australia, and India. And I think that's just the way cricket has gone in the last 20, 25 years. Yeah. So it's a shame. It's a shame because the talent is clearly there, but the culture of cricket has changed in the West Indies.
It has changed significantly, and probably the West Indies Cricket Board let the ball drop a bit after. It's probably
but this is the other thing. So this was happening before T20 took off. It's already starting to go downhill in the early to mid 2000s. And I think in 2005, Chris Gale was captain, and they had a lot of contract disputes, and that's when things really started to go downhill, like in the political sense, with all the different boards and the West Indies Cricket Board. And then 2 years after that, obviously, IPL started, and then it just the whole T20 train took off, and that was perfect for all these West Indian players because they're obviously quite talented in that format, and if there wasn't much incentive for them to play international cricket for the West Indies, it was always going to be about going around playing these franchise T20 leagues, which is basically what they've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. I mean, they've been very successful. How many IPL teams have wanted West Indian players? They used to play in the BBL as well. They're sought after all over the world, but as an entity, as a international team, it's just not what it was 25 years ago.
No, and it's very logistics as well. Traveling from island to island, they're quite far away from each other.
Yeah,
and even during the T20 World Cup last year as well, teams had to travel far and between the islands. So it is a bit of a logistics nightmare at times. But they're a part of cricket, and they're exciting. And the history behind them as a cricketing team, what they did in those, the golden eras, so to speak. It will be sad without, cricket will be poorer without the West Indies in it. And we don't want that to happen. So hopefully, with this divisional system proposed, they can have opportunities to play more Test cricket, even if it's against lower-ranked teams, but they get that cricket in them and get these youngsters experiencing what Test cricket's all about.
Well, I mean, this is the other thing. Like, I'm sure that the West Indies will be able to top Division 2 or get near the top of Division 2.
You would think so, yeah. If that's the case, yeah. They should be.
Yeah, and if they're playing a lot more cricket, they're just only going to gain experience, and then hopefully they'll be able to, if they get promoted to Division 1, then they'll be able to challenge the other teams. So,
well, I suppose you sort of see it in the county championship. They have Division 1 and Division 2, and you don't want to be in Division 2. You want to be in Division 1. Because if you're some of the counties, when they slip out of Division 1 into Division 2, you know about it. So that has worked to an extent in England with county cricket. So you could do something similar in Test cricket in terms of that aspect. And I'm sure if England are in Division 2, let's just say, they have a couple of bad years and they get demoted to Division 2, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't like being in Division 2, So it will make them play better and look to improve and have a bit of jeopardy in there. And that's what you want whenever you do something like this. So the ICC are going to come up with an idea and, work out the kinks and the minor details. But, there's a lot of people discussing this, which is good. And it's always good to have positive debate, constructive talks as well. We need to do something. We need to do something to make sure that Test cricket thrives for years to come, because otherwise, if we don't do anything, then it probably won't be here. And that's what you hear a lot of people saying. It won't be here in 10 or 5 years' time. Whenever we say those comments, Jehan, it's always here, isn't it? 10 years have gone past, it's still here. So it will always be here in some capacity. How many teams or how many people will be playing it will be another question in another 20 or 30 years from now.
Yeah.
But we need to do something now to sort out the mess that international cricket is in at the moment. Not just Test cricket, but how the game is run, and T20 franchise leagues as well. How to, I think we let the ball drop when that happened. We didn't plan ahead enough in terms of looking forward to what has happened now. You can't predict the future, obviously, but we didn't plan ahead for these type of things with T20 cricket. We didn't really expect it to be such a big thing as it is now. But is it too late to get out of the mess?
Yeah, look, I think the ICC or cricket in general needs to recognise that international cricket is so different, or it is different to franchise league cricket. It's a completely different thing. International cricket is about bilateral series. I know we have tournaments, but it's mainly about bilateral series. It's about the Ashes, it's India, Pakistan, different rivalries. It used to be about India, England, and West Indies, Australia, West Indies. There's a random rivalry that's come up recently between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka after some feisty series. So it's always been about that those bilateral series and country versus country. Which is not the same in domestic T20. Like you don't get a 5-match one-day series between New South Wales and Victoria. You just don't. That just doesn't happen.
No.
It's the BBL, the IPL. It's just all continuous yearly leagues, basically. And do you want international cricket to go down that road, or do you want it to stay the way it has been for so long, which is international competition between two countries?
It's sort of like football, isn't it? Football's like that, isn't it? You have leagues and then you play in World Cups and that's it. Or friendly matches. So we don't want cricket to go down that route, I suppose. No, it wouldn't be right, would it? It would just be weird.
There's a suggestion about when people have talked about cutting back on ODI cricket because no one really is interested in it as much with the rise of T20, and you can just have it for World Cups. But it's sort of like, okay, but then that's not really a sport. You're just playing an exhibition tournament, and then they're learning how to play the ODI cricket in the tournament itself. And that's kind of about to happen in the Champions Trophy that's coming up. Because teams have just not played much ODI cricket leading into that. Australia played Pakistan before, and no one remembers this, right? They lost 3-0, I think, didn't they? At home?
2-1. They won the first game in Melbourne, which was a close game, and then they lost in Adelaide and Perth.
Yeah.
But Australia were resting players because of the Test series with India.
Yeah, they got hammered.
Pat Cummins went to go watch Coldplay.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't give my opinion about that, but yeah, I mean they.
But it worked. Just to finish on that point, but it worked. He was fresh at the end of the series, and he, bowled the others, so he got through the series.
What wasn't ready for Perth, but second Test match in was fine. But no, so they lost that series quite. The 2-1, but they got hammered in that series, and they have barely played any ODIs since the end of the World Cup, really.
And they're going to play 2 against Sri Lanka of the Test series.
So that will be a little bit of
Champions Trophy.
2 games preparation for them before the Champions.
Well, it was meant to be 1, but they added an extra game on. So
I saw that. So with one-day cricket, it's sort of getting to a stage where international teams not really interested in playing too many, and it's just going to be about tournaments from now on. Which I don't know. I just find that a bit odd. Like, I don't think you can call it a legitimate sport if you just play tournaments only.
Yes, I suppose that's the thing in sport. You have to have an international vibe about it. Yeah, that's what makes it unique. Like many other sports, like rugby and football, you have international rivalries. But I suppose those sports are different to cricket because they have international matches, sort of like bilateral series, probably. You have friendlies in that. Whereas then they just go off and play their own domestic leagues or something like that, which you have in football. But in cricket, it's that bilateral series cricket that makes cricket what it is.
Yeah.
And if you lose that aspect of the sport, then you just have T20 leagues and it becomes a bit diluted, really. You lose something about it. Test cricket is cricket's identity.
Yeah.
And if you lose that, then you don't have cricket at all, really. You just have a T20 format of cricket that, don't get me wrong, I like T20 cricket. I'm a cricket tragic. I like it. I think it's good for associate nations, more importantly, to get them involved in the game. But Test cricket is the fabric, the soul, and that fabric of cricket that makes what it is.
Of international cricket, and it becomes a problem when only a few countries in the world can afford to play that many.
Yes, it would be pretty boring if Australia and India and England just played all the time.
Yeah,
you need the West Indies, you need Pakistan, you need Sri Lanka, you need New Zealand. They make Test cricket. You need South Africa. In terms of those countries playing against each other. So hopefully this promotion relegation will certainly help in that aspect. You just need to come up with the right structure, that's all. And how to go about that process is the next step. Once you get that right, then hopefully everything else will fall into place. But you just can't rush into making decisions at this stage. You've got to take a bit of time and, get it right. Because, if you make the decision, then you probably can't undo it if you've already done it. So, you probably could, but you have to ensure that it's the right way of going about it. So you have to be methodical when coming up with this sort of system. But, it'll be another thing if the countries agree to it. Probably Australia and England, India will probably agree to it, but will the West Indies agree to it? Will Zimbabwe? They've got to have something in return. So that will be the interesting conundrum: is that everyone be on board? And that's the thing, Jehan, is that you need everyone to be on board. You need 12 Test playing nations to be on board for this. And if they're on board, then we're good to go. If they're not, then you got some problems. You got some issues.
I mean, I suppose for Division 2, then you've also got to think about the logistics of organising Test matches in Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, even Ireland, which may prove a bit of an issue.
And you got to think about DRS as well, because those countries can't afford DRS either.
Well, I think with that, ICC just have to pay for it.
Yeah,
makes so much money.
It makes sense.
So maybe that's more just an issue for Afghanistan. Actually, they'd probably have to move all of their Test matches to the UAE, probably.
Yeah, logistics wise, sort of what happened with Pakistan for a while there, and when they played in the UAE, and even they played games in England. Funny enough, back in the day, they played Australia in the Test series in 2010.
Yeah, no, that was Steve Smith and Tim Payne's debut
at Lord's. Yes, and they won a Test as well in that series against Australia. They lost at Lord's, obviously. They lost at Lord's.
They won at Headingley.
Won at Headingley. Yeah. There was another Test which Australia won, I think. Or did they?
No, it was drawn. It was 1-1.
It was drawn, yeah. So the series was 1-1 in that tour. But so it comes down to logistics and how you go about that. But it comes back to organizing the structure and thinking about it carefully and whether or not it will, how you're going to do it. Are you going to do it by rankings to sort out the divisions? So you finish in the top half of the rankings, you're in Division 1, bottom half, Division 2. And then how are you going to, are you going to follow a similar thing in the County Championship in England? Because they have a final, do they, for Division 2, do they? They have their own final, and whoever...
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah,
finishes on top of the table. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and then you either get promoted or relegated. So maybe the Test cricket could follow that sort of similar structure or something along those lines. Maybe look at other sports that have promotion and relegation as well. Sort of English Premier League football have that as well in the Premier League there. They have that sort of thing.
No, that's right. From memory of following county cricket in 15, 20 years ago, the teams that when they stay in Division 1, they tend to maintain a good standard. And then when they get to Division 2, they sort of deteriorate a fair bit.
Yeah, I suppose, the standard of cricket is not what it is in Division 2 when you slip down there.
Yeah.
But
because you're not playing against
you're not playing against the top ranked teams, and the competitiveness levels drop off a bit. But it'll be interesting to see how they do that. Do they incorporate that into the World Test Championship as well? How's that going to work? Because you only have 9 teams at the moment that play the World Test Championship out of the 12. The 3 teams that don't play is obvious. It's Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, and Ireland don't play. The other teams do play to make up the 9. So what do you do with that? Do you still have 2 divisions in the World Test Championship, or Division 1 battle it out for the World Test Championship? Division 2 have an opportunity to get into the tournament? Is that how it's going to work? Maybe. Possible format there.
I think they'd probably just make the Test Championship for Division 1.
And then obviously if you finish top of Division 2, you get into the World Test Championship.
Or maybe they can have a championship game between the teams that end up top of Division 2, and they can battle it out for promotion or something.
Yes, that was in that article, wasn't it, Jehan? They had a similar idea there, didn't they?
Yeah.
About in the standings or something in Division 2, the winner will go into the elite group. So the top 2 from Division 2 will go into Division 1, whoever won that test or something. I think they said that test match. I think they also said that, when they came up with the idea in the early 2000s, they said second division matches would be 4-day games and played on a home and away basis. I thought that was interesting. 4-day tests. Even back then. That was quite interesting. I thought that was quite an interesting thing that they suggested there, was to have second division matches as 4-day test matches.
Yeah.
I suppose they had that sort of inkling about the lower ranked nations, probably test matches not going 5 days or something like that. But I thought that was very interesting. The idea at the time.
They're just assuming that their batting's not going to be as good, right? With the lower ranked nations. But then you got to factor in pitches as well. If you're playing on some really flat pitch in Bangladesh, then you get back for 4 days and get a draw easily. So, I'm not a fan of 4-day test matches.
No, that's been making headlines, hasn't it? Obviously, that's always been a debate, hasn't it? About 4-day tests. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? But as we saw in this Australia-India series, if the Melbourne test was 4 days, then we wouldn't have probably got a result. Probably, who knows? But we probably wouldn't, given how that match panned out. In Australia losing those wickets, and they had to bat conservatively for a bit there, and that took time out of the game. But by having the 5th day, they were able to bat on a little bit and obviously force the result. And also weather as well. What happened in Brisbane, if we had 4 days there, still would have been a draw, but, just in case if the rain subsided and we had play, then we only had like 3 days if day one was washed out, which it was in that test.
Yeah. So I think it would be way easier to get a draw. Now, if you, for example, when two years ago, when Australia went to Pakistan, they were playing on those ridiculously dead pitches.
Oh yes, yeah.
If you were playing 4-day tests on those, it'd be over when the scores wouldn't have gone anywhere. Like it would be such a stalemate. So I think
I'm quite staggered that Australia were able to win that last test for that series.
Yeah, I mean that was tough even in 3 5-day test matches, and it took them to the last day at the end of the third test to be able to get that win. So I think if there were 4-day test matches, teams that know they're not really going to have a chance of winning could just prepare really flat tracks and just try and get draws easily. The other thing is, like a 5-day test match is supposed to be a maximum of 450 overs. I think the proposal with 4-day tests is to try and get 100 overs in the day, so you're getting 400 overs as opposed to 450. So that's only 50 overs less. So it's essentially, instead of a 5-day test, it's a 4.5-day test, but played over 4 days. But realistically, that's only going to work in England or possibly in Australia, where the daylight hours last a lot longer. Like that's not.
I think they bowl 100 overs in the Sheffield Shield. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I think
so it might work in Australia. Probably work in New Zealand. It's not going to work in the Caribbean. It's not going to work in the UAE. It's not going to work in the subcontinent. And the other thing is, to try and make that work, you may end up with a scenario where they're having to have like 8 or 9 a.m. starts to test matches, and if there's dew around, then the toss becomes key, and
yes,
this causes too many issues.
You got to think about those finer details, I suppose. But yeah, well, we already play 4-day tests. Well, England do when they play Ireland before an Ashes series. They do, and they're going to play Zimbabwe in a 4-day test this year.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's probably indicating that they're playing Ireland and Zimbabwe. Probably the test may not go 5 days, so they probably said for money or financial reasons, probably 4 days, and give that a go. But then, pretty all right playing 5 days against everyone else. So,
I think the best way to improve Test cricket, make it more entertaining, is to have more in the pitches of the bowlers. That's all they need to do. Like, if wickets are falling a lot faster during the course of the test match, then that means that the match is going forward or it's progressing a lot faster than it would do, say, if you get to like day 2 or 3, the wicket's completely fattened out and the batsmen are not taking too many risks and they're just tucking in. I mean, that's all right to watch, but if they're being challenged by the bowlers on a regular basis, then that just moves the game forward. And then also the matches will naturally finish, within 5 days or within 4 days. So I think
that's a very good point. Because
I think that's what they should do. I thought the Sydney wicket this year, I suppose, is an example of that. I thought that the Sydney wicket was a little bit too far that way. It was too much up and down bounce.
Well, it was a new type of grass that they had on the wicket, and
so it was a little bit
this time around.
It was a little bit too up and down on days 1 and 2, but it was flattening out. And Pat Cummins at the end said, "I'd rather play on a wicket like this than something that's going to be flat and lost."
And usually in the SCG in the past, that has been the case.
Yes. Yeah, well, it used to be the case at Adelaide as well. I used to hate watching an Adelaide Test match where Australia have lost the toss on day 1, and you have to watch Paul Collingwood blocking out a double 100 over 3 days.
Amazing Adelaide, yes, 2006-07. But
I used to
the end of the test, it would turn a bit as well in Adelaide.
I used to hate that, and then that's the reason that they lost the series against South Africa in 2012. They couldn't bowl them out on that last day because it just got way too flat. But I think things changed after they started playing the day-night tests there with the pink ball, because they started
And the
leaving
drop-in wicket as well.
Yeah.
In Adelaide when that came in as well. That made a big difference in
Well,
how
the
test
ball
match
actually goes through off the Adelaide wicket these days.
Yeah, it does. There's good pace and bounce in it.
Yeah.
Not as much as you will get in Perth and Brisbane.
No. Back in the day, it used to be so flat and the ball wouldn't do anything. And like you just have to watch the opposition bat for 2 days before Australia could try and make something out of the test match. But
yes, there has been some pretty flat wickets in Adelaide over the years, but now with the day-night test, it's been more interesting now. And
I think it's the best wicket for test matches in the country now. The Adelaide wicket, probably Adelaide and the Gabba they're probably the two best for just an even contest between bat and ball.
Melbourne's improved slightly.
Melbourne has been pretty good the last few years. This year, it randomly really flattened out, though. It became quite difficult to get any wickets towards the end.
But it still had a bit of something in there if you bowled in the right areas. So
there was a little bit in there, yeah. And Perth is a weird one. It's almost like this kind of schizophrenic type of wicket. Like it's either really flat and does nothing, or the ball's doing loads sideways.
As we saw that first test with India and obviously last summer with Pakistan.
Yeah. I think I said when we previewed the series, I said the Perth wicket, if it's that standard pace and bounce that you get at the whacker without any sideways movement, that will suit Australia. But if there's any sideways, then that's going to help India's bowlers. And it turned out it kind of had both, because India struggled with the pace and bounce in the first innings. Like Virat Kohli was like trying to jump onto the front foot, and he got caught trying to defend off his shoulder, off Hazelwood. And at that point, I thought, Australia on top. They should bat well here. But then Bumrah and Siraj started moving the ball sideways, and that proved.
How many wickets fell on day one? It was like
it was 17.
17, yeah.
Australia was 66 or 7 at the end of the first day. Because Bumrah and Siraj were getting that sideways movement, that was just proved way too difficult for Australia to handle. But then it randomly flattened out the next day. Like Mitchell Starc spent 2 hours at the crease.
And Australia's ticked over 100, and India made loads of runs in their second innings. And
the problem was the damage had been done by that stage. So it's the Optus wicket for test matches is becoming a bit of.
I suppose in Australia with test match pitches, they all have something a bit about them, do they? Hobart does. It's always a green top there in Belrive, sort of English type conditions down there, and that's not a bad pitch, And once it flattens out, I don't know. Maybe it's got a New Zealand. You see that in New Zealand, you prepare green tops, but they're still good for batting.
Yeah,
ball doesn't do much. It's just green on top. But it does do a little bit, as Australia found out in that test series last year against New Zealand. But once you get in and get set, it's pretty good afterwards. So every pitch in Australia has a bit of something about it. But I suppose with dropping wickets, it's a bit different now.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're not extreme pitches. Like they're pretty standard. You can score runs on them. When it does a bit, you can take wickets. Even if it's not doing a lot, bowlers still have a chance.
I think the ball has something to do with that as well. The Kookaburra ball.
Yeah.
It's made a difference. It's got more lacquer. It's got a pronounced seam. It's more harder.
Well, they changed
got a bit of something in them, so it helps.
And Khawaja's been going on about that recently. It
has made a difference. A lot of people mention about the ball, but it certainly made a difference over the last few years in Australia. That's so tough for batting.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I found in recent years is I feel like batting in Australia has really become a bit of a new ball wicket. So if you can get through that new ball and maybe the first 25 overs, then you can really set yourself. And actually, you can start attacking the bowling after that.
And we saw that in the series against India. We saw that
Yeah.
once the ball gets a bit softer, it became easier for batting on both sides.
I think that was the strategy. So I think with McSweeney, Khawaja, and Labuschagne Smith were basically, that was their job. And then as the ball got older, they wanted Travis Head to come in and take the attack.
And they did that in Adelaide, for example. And Head came in and scored that 100, and
Yes.
it worked out well, didn't it?
Yeah. So I think that was definitely their strategy. Yeah. So I can't complain about the pitches in recent years. I think they've been good. Like they have favoured bowling. I wouldn't say hugely, but they have favoured bowling a little bit more than what has been the case in Australia for a long time. But I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, I think no, that's, you want that. You want competitiveness in Test cricket. You're not going to get the perfect pitch. I think everyone wants the perfect pitch, but you'll never get it in the middle. It's always going to favour one side or the other. Like we saw in Sydney, it favoured the bowlers dramatically. And like we saw at the Gabba a couple of seasons ago with Australia and South Africa that lasted 2 days on that absolute green top.
Yeah.
That was too much in the favour of the bowling side of things of the game. So you're just going to get that balance just right. And it goes back to your earlier point about Test pitches having something in them around the world.
Yeah.
You need that contest between bat and ball to make Test cricket what it is, because it is a test between bat and ball. You don't want, I remember watching Test matches growing up, Jehan in Australia, and we just talked about the Adelaide Oval, seeing flat wickets in Australia piling on the runs and make 450, 500 plus in the first innings. And you know who's going to win. And it's always going to be difficult, even for Australia to take wickets on those flat wickets. So you need something in them to make it competitive and have something that both teams can look forward to with the bowling side. And I think that's what we saw in Australia and India in this series recently, is that all the pitches had something in for the bowlers and something you can use off the surface. And if you got in and got set, you can score runs.
Yeah.
Which both sides found tough at times, but they managed to score runs at crucial times.
Well, they weren't impossible to bat on. Like once Marnus and Travis Head got in at Adelaide, they batted pretty well. At Brisbane, Smith and Head again batted really well. There's always a little bit in the wicket at Brisbane just because of extra pace and bounce. But that's good. I mean, you can play. It means you can play your shots. You don't have to worry about excessive sideways or up and down movement. And then, and then obviously Sydney Sydney was probably had the most in it for the bowlers.
It was rated satisfactory by the ICC. I think the other pitches were rated good or. Rated good or very good, I think.
Level above satisfactory, yeah.
Yeah, level above.
Yeah.
I don't think they were average. I don't think they were below average or average ratings. I think they were good ratings or something like that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing where India can't, they have no reason to complain about the pitches, which, which is always an issue when Australia tour India.
Yes, that's always a debate every time, and that's always a constant debate with pitches there.
When you're before the Test match, when you're scrubbing up an area of rough outside where Jadeja is going to be landing them, I mean that's just I don't like to see that sort of thing. Like
well, we saw it in Pakistan. A bit of a weird method there with England, but obviously I think people can say fair enough because those pitches in Pakistan are like concrete. So they needed to do something different there to,
Well, Pakistan have since they started playing at home again, they have not let their pitchers develop their cricket, because they naturally have good fast bowlers, but there's just nothing there for fast bowlers.
No.
And I don't
And
think
that used to be the case in India as well, but then they started to put a bit of life into the wickets for the quicks in India, and
Right.
and then obviously preparing pitches that turn a bit, and that sort of brought the quality of playing spin down for India, because generally Indian players are not good at playing spin these days, as they
Yeah,
once did.
I think I spoke to an Indian fan about this recently, and it was just on a comment thread on YouTube. And basically, what he said was around 2011-12, they got whitewashed here in Australia 4-0, and they went to England. I think they got whitewashed there as well. And MS Dhoni was captain at the time, and he was like, "Oh, they gave us all these horrendous conditions to play, and we've got to do the same thing back in India." So then they changed their policy to create just raging turners from ball one, and it was like, this is how we're going to win Test matches at home.
That
And
can
then,
also backfire as well if you go down that.
well, I think the pitches became so poor, so bad that even the Indian players couldn't score runs on them, right? And that's what happens when it goes too far that way. It becomes impossible for any player to play against them, right?
Yes, no, it's a lottery. That's what it is.
becomes a lottery, and they're quite happy to be play on those lottery pitches because they thought that's still their best chance of winning.
Whereas it's probably a hindrance because of their batters playing spin outside of India, which has been a bit difficult for them.
Yeah. So I think that's basically what happened, and like Ravindra Jadeja has basically made a career out of bowling darts into these dust bowls, basically, and the guys on the Grey Cricketer, they give him so much praise for his bowling. They call him one of the best left arm spinners of all time. I really don't buy that. And I think I said to one of the Indian fans, Jadeja is not going to do anything with the ball here. Like, it's not going to spit like a cobra here. Like, he'll be lucky if he.
No, he was pretty pedestrian in.
No, that's the thing. He averaged 54 in the series, and he never looked threatening really at any stage. And it was the same when they went to England a year or two ago, a couple of years ago. So that sort of bowling is only really designed for those raging turners that they get in India from ball one. And that's why like average spinners like Mitchell Santner was able to do a job. I think Ajaz Patel got wickets in that last match. Michael Clarke all those years ago in Mumbai.
Yes, 2004. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you're playing on those pitches, Stephen O'Keefe is another one.
Pune, yeah. Got 12 wickets.
All you really have to do.
Jason Frazier, sorry.
Yeah, 12 wickets, yeah. When you're playing on those raging turners where you know that it's either going to grip and turn or it's going to go straight on. I think particularly the left arm spinners become quite potent in that scenario against the right handers, because especially if you're fast through the air and you can get the ball to skid. And that's what Stephen O'Keefe did, because he's not someone that he doesn't get a lot of bounce. So he's sort of flat through the air. And that's what Jadeja does. That's what Santner did. And it's so funny because like Mitchell Santner his test record was pretty poor until that series. And then he's just running through
he picked up a fifer until that fifer that he picked up in India, I don't think. I don't think he had a test fifer before that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he ran through the Indian batting lineup. And the conventional left armer, Ajaz Patel, he actually they went after him a bit in the first two tests. And when Santner was injured in the last test match, Patel got wickets. He sort of adapted a little bit by that match. But yeah, so I don't like the way that they do that. And to be fair, it's not just India. Sri Lanka will do it as well. Sri Lanka will do it. We've got this series coming up. I'm sure first test match will be a raging turner. Bangladesh do it also. India have struggled when they've toured Bangladesh on those turners.
They did in the last series they played there. It was a bit of a struggle for them.
It was actually Ashwin and India's lower order batting that got them, got them out of trouble. But
I think Ashwin scored 100, did he, in that series? I think.
Yes, yeah. So these teams they all do it. I feel like it doesn't help them progress as a test nation, like, because if that's your only method of trying to win, then what are you going to do when you go overseas?
Yeah.
And,
that is a very good point. How are you going to play well overseas? Very foreign conditions to what you experience at home. So you need to prepare pitches that are going to help you win overseas as well, rather than thinking about your own home advantage, which is generally the case in cricket and has created a lot of debate, no doubt. But that is a interesting talking point in Test cricket, more so about pitches and conditions and making them fair for both sides. But I suppose at the end of the day, you have to play on the surface that's prepared. So that is the way it goes, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, you back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't think the West Indies doctored their pitches. They just played on.
No, but you did hear about the preparation they did about rolling the grass in a certain way for that sheen on it. And
yes, that's right. Yeah,
especially when Australia toured. Watching that documentary on YouTube about Australia touring in '95 and winning that series, and how the pitches were prepared in like glass, really, it's like ice, in terms of preparing those types of pitches for that series.
Yeah, I think the Trinidad, the Port of Spain pitch in Trinidad used to be a bit up and down and green. I think that was where that famous confrontation happened between Ambrose and Steve Waugh. But generally, Sabina Park, Barbados, Guyana, they, as you say, they had that sheen on the pitch where you could see your reflection in the pitch. But they were good, generally good batting wickets and with some pace and bounce. And the thing is, the West Indian bowlers in those days, it didn't matter how flat the pitch was; they could make the batsman uncomfortable. There's a very famous. There's a clip on YouTube. I've seen it a few times, where it's England West Indies. I think from like '95 maybe, or '94 maybe. I think it was '94. And it's like day one of the Test match. I'm not sure where it was. And Tony Gregg's on commentary, and it's like, this wicket looks hard and flat. It's very flat. It's going to be perfect for batting. And then Courtney Walsh comes in and bowls this bouncer that hits Robin Smith in the jaw. This is just after he's going on about how flat the wicket is.
But I suppose it's one of those things in cricket. You don't know how a wicket's going to play until you actually bowl on it and how it's going to react. So you don't know. Could be the flattest pitch in all of cricket, but as you mentioned there, you get one that leaps up and hits you in the jaw. Yeah. Then you're like, oh, okay, this is not flat after all. I think there's no such thing as a flat wicket. We just say that. There's always something in a wicket. There's no such thing as a flat wicket. We just use that term in cricket to describe a wicket that's not doing much. The ball's not doing much off the surface. But when you bend your back and bowl in the right areas and get something, then it's not a flat wicket. There's always something there.
I think that Rawalpindi wicket in the first test was pretty close.
Well, Nathan Lyon said this is the flattest wicket I've ever bowled on.
Yeah.
In the test documentary, he was like, I wouldn't repeat what he said, but I think it was a fair summation about the wicket in Rawalpindi. That was Yeah. How Australia won 1-0 in that series, I don't know. How they won that last test on those types of pitches. And
but then England went there the following year and won 3-0. So.
Yeah, well, it's England. They're playing baseball, and obviously they came back to Pakistan last year and lost 2-1.
Yes,
because Pakistan did what they did with the fans and all that stuff was a bit unusual preparation, but it sort of did something. Sajid Khan and Norman Adley got the ball to turn a bit, and got some reward, I suppose, on those tough pitches in Pakistan. But I suppose when you haven't played cricket in Pakistan for a long time, and the pitches, even the Pakistan players are not used to those pitches either because they had to play in the UAE in that. So it takes a bit of time to get used to home conditions again, but maybe they found something in terms of that formula that we saw last year in that test series. And hopefully that would change the fortunes around for Pakistan playing at home and make it a fortress, as it should be when you're playing at home. You shouldn't lose at home in test matches. So just going back to promotion and relegation, interesting subject. Whether or not it will make a difference remains to be seen, but it's always good to explore new ideas and possibilities and to help the game grow. And I suppose it's a good thing, Jehan, that everyone's talking about it because everyone cares about Test cricket. And it still has that relevance with people. We wouldn't be talking about Test cricket if we didn't care about it. So I think that's a good thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, the question is it only England, Australia, and Indian fans that care about Test cricket? It would be nice to know that there's still South Africans fans and Pakistani fans, New Zealand fans, possibly West Indies fans that care about Test cricket. But it's hard to know. South Africa's an interesting one for me because they played that series in New Zealand when they took a second or third string team across because it clashed with the inaugural franchise T20 tournament that they were starting in South Africa. I think was that in South Africa or in the UAE? I can't remember.
The series that South Africa played in New Zealand.
Yeah, when they took the second or the second.
That was in New Zealand. That was New Zealand.
But they didn't take their first team players because they were all playing franchise.
They were playing the SAT20.
Yes, the SAT20. Yeah,
they wanted to prioritise the Test players like Rabada and Nokia to play in that major tournament.
Yeah. So that obviously happened. They got beaten in New Zealand. I watched a bit of the series where they went to the West Indies. They won that series, but I don't think the margins were by that much. I think they won the first test by 40 runs or something. So reasonably competitive between the two sides. But I was watching the cricket and was thinking, the quality of the cricket here, this doesn't seem like Test cricket. It seems like sort of maybe even looks like a little bit like county cricket kind of thing. Like I didn't feel the standard was up to the standard of normal Test cricket.
Well, they went to Bangladesh, didn't they, South Africa, and they did well.
Yeah, and they won in Bangladesh. So that's a good achievement because you know what the conditions are going to be like there.
But I suppose people got a bit, they didn't play Australia or England or India. Well, they played against India, did they? In that cycle.
They played against India, and I think they drew that series, maybe.
And then they had that test match that ended in, was it 2 days or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
They overcooked the deck, and India went on about that as well. I think what I noticed when when South Africa toured here 2 or 3 years ago now, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Was their batting had gone down quite a lot. Like the quality of the batting was not what it used to be, but they still had really good bowling. So obviously Rabada's been around for a while. Amrit Nortje was bowling wheels. The other, I can't remember the other guy's name. Plays a lot of T20 cricket.
Ngidi.
Ngidi, yeah, he bowled he bowled quite well as well. So the bowling, the fast bowling in particular, has always been good.
Maharaj hasn't done bad as the spinner. He's been playing for a long
Yeah,
time.
so I don't really rate Maharaj that much, but I think his record's been pretty good. Yeah, I think I can't remember who it was. One of the South Africans was saying, maybe it was Sean Pollock, was saying that Maharaj has been really good for them as a spinner. So I think they probably went through a minor dip when all that stuff was happening around the SAT 20 and they couldn't pick their best team and all of that. But they're slowly getting back to where they were prior to that. So I think they definitely deserve to have gotten into the WTC. People have said that they haven't really played against the top sides. They've played half as many matches as England, which is, I think that's just the ridiculousness of the WTC format. But that's not to say I don't think they deserve to get to the final. Some of the South African pundits have said, well, we've played half as many games as England because we don't have the funding to play against all the top 3 or 4 sides. Yeah. So what do you expect? You can't punish us for that. In the games that we've been playing in, we have dominated and managed to get to the top. So
yeah, well, that was out of their control. They can only play what's in front of them, and they deserve to be there because they actually played well and they actually got on a bit of a run.
Yeah,
and I think it's a good thing for Test cricket, really, if South Africa's in the final.
I was about to say that. Yeah, so that can only be a good thing for South African Test cricket.
Rematch of 1912 at Lords against Australia. Bit of cricket trivia there.
Yeah, so it's only going to increase or gain interest in South Africa amongst South African fans in terms of Test cricket, which is good. Yeah, so it'll bring more television audiences to South Africa. The fans themselves have got something else to be invested in apart from the SAT 20. So yeah, that's good. I mean, so you got England, Australia, and India. You want all those other teams just I'm talking about financially the teams that are below them, like South Africa, Pakistan, New Zealand. You still want them to be competitive and challenging those other teams. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? If you look at England, for example, yeah, they are one of the most financially they're one of the teams with the most money in cricket, but they haven't necessarily always been in the top 3 in the last 10, 15 years. They've been pretty up and down, which would suggest that, it's not all about money. What you want to do is you want to have enough money in the game within the system where money isn't a factor when it comes to how well these teams are doing. So you want it sort of evenly just distributed in that sense. Yeah, so I think yeah, with a 2-tier system and that, I think that can only be a good thing. I think the South Africa and Australia, the South Africa Australia final will be a good match. I think it will be good to watch.
Yeah, it would be, and sort of a rematch of 1912 all over again at Lords between Australia and South Africa. Bit of a trivia question for our listeners and watchers of this episode of the podcast. What do we mean by rematch of 1912 between South Africa and Australia at Lords? Mention it in the comments, your answers. If you're a historian of the game, you would know. Like me and Jehan, we know what the answer is. But just to test your cricket knowledge out there, it was quite an interesting match as well, back nearly over 100 years ago. So a rematch again in this World Test Championship final will be quite a spectacular event to watch. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it goes in that World Test Championship final, and also promotion relegation as well in Test cricket to see whether or not it will make an impact on the game or not. So
Well,
we'll have to wait and see.
what I'd like to see is a full house at that match. It's at Lords, yeah. So I'd
It's
like
at
to see
Lords,
a full house at Lords. I'd like to see a lot of South African fans there as well. I don't know if you remember, but the '99 World Cup, there were South African fans all over the place at all the matches. Like, cricket was huge at that time, and I suppose at the time they really thought they were going to win that World Cup as well. They were one of the best teams in the World Cup.
Until that faithful semi-final, yes, that all changed.
Yeah,
they were looking good.
No, I mean it would be nice to see that level of interest again in South African cricket. I mean, that's fine at home, but this is going to be obviously in a different country overseas. So to see that support would be good.
Yeah, no, it would be a good game, no doubt. And obviously Australia like playing at Lords anyway. They have a fantastic record at Lords. Obviously, they didn't lose a test match there against England for 90-odd years until 2009.
There's plenty of Australians that live in London, whether that's permanently or if they're just there on a working visa or just traveling or whatever. So there should be plenty of Australian fans that go to the final. I'm backing Australia to win. I think they probably will be too strong for South Africa. But it'd be good to see a good test match, actually. Yeah, on a neutral.
Yeah, it would be. And especially at Lords as well for the World Test Championship. It was meant to be the first one back in 2021, but obviously due to circumstances at the time had to be moved to Southampton. New Zealand won, and then obviously we had the one at the Oval a couple of years ago, which was good.
Yeah,
and Australia won that, and obviously now here at Lords to really set the scene really for the World Test Championship at the home of cricket. So hopefully that's the case. I agree, Australia are favourites, but you want to see a good competitive Test match, really, at the end of the day, and let's hope that's the case when we play this World Test Championship final. But yeah, promotion, relegation, Test cricket. Is it a good thing or bad thing? We'll have to wait and see in the coming years, I suppose, Jehan, in terms of the ICC and what they are doing on this front. But good to hear your thoughts on that. Hi, everyone. Hope you enjoyed part 2 of our Cricket Ramblings episode with Jehan and I on Test cricket promotion and relegation. If you're watching or listening to this episode on our YouTube channel, let us know in the comments your thoughts on Test cricket promotion and relegation. We would love to hear what you have to say. Stay tuned for part 3 of our Cricket Ramblings episode with Jehan, where we discuss the Test series between Sri Lanka and Australia.